My dear friends, in my game against Golod, we saw an endgame which arose immediately after the opening, and I would like to give you an example of how to play this kind of endgame with white, because in the opening one might have had an impression that in fact this endgame was not so promising for white, but this was not because of the position, but because of the wrong strategy white chose with knight e2 and castling long. In my game against Ghaem.mp4 from 2006, Asian Games, after bishop f2, f5, I managed to play a bit better. So after f5, instead of c5, as I had played against Golod, black is trying to fight against the advance e4. It should be noted that once black played f5, e4 is actually rarely good, because black would almost always be able to play knight f6 and get some pressure along the diagonal and the open files. So now white should open diagonals slowly. That is, he should only open them when he is sure it is for his advantage. And now how to proceed about this? First of all, the knight should not go to e2 until the bishop is developed. This should be more or less common sense. So I go bishop b5, attacking the knight on d7, and I also try to provoke the move c6. So after c6, bishop d3. The point in this provocation is that the bishop on b7 is not as active anymore, cannot support idea e5, e4, and if black plays c5 anyway, then surely he hasn't won a tempo playing c7, c6. So I thought this would improve my chances, and black here, he could have played e5, and after knight e2, rook e8, castles, we would get the position where white has two bishops and black on the other hand has no major weaknesses, and the position would be fully playable. For instance, after e takes d4, e takes d4. But I still liked my chances. I thought that white is doing a bit better, and was pretty optimistic about this position. And my opponent decided that he has to play more actively than this, played c5, knight e2, rook a d8, castles, and e5. Now it might seem that black is playing very actively, that he has achieved c5, e5, brought his rook to d8, is maybe creating some ideas, but on the other hand, white has two bishops, and this should never be underestimated. White has two bishops, and despite of black's activity at the moment, it should be clear that at some point when bishops will come to play, the complete openness of the position will be to white's advantage. That is why it was wise for black to keep, in fact, the pawn on c6, or to keep the pawn on e6, but to play both c5 and e5, trying to open the position, should be in fact to white's advantage. So here, and here it is important for white to remember that he should take his time and not do anything very quick, because in fact for this the well-developed army of black might be well prepared. For instance, if white here would find it attractive to play e4, then after f takes e4, f takes e4, let's say knight f4, knight f4, e takes f4, d5, knight e5, then black might get some counterplay because of his strong knight on e5 and some ideas connected to f3. So the side which has two bishops doesn't necessarily have to open all the files and diagonals immediately. He can take his time, so I bring my rook to d1. My plan is actually easy. I want to go rook d1, rook e1, and at some point knight c3, and then maybe when necessary e4. So opening position at my leisure, and here black somehow lost the thread of the game. was probably unhappy about the way it was developing. So the exchanges e takes d4, e takes d4, c takes d4, knight d4 are apparently also to white's advantage. f5 is hanging, knight e6 is threatened. So not so easy to suggest a good plan for black, and my opponent in fact didn't find it and played knight e7, probably working with an idea like e4, but in fact like one move ideas are not working in positions like this. I'm well equipped against and play knight c3. Now you see all white's pieces are healthily placed, and two bishops will still come to play to show the decisive strengths in this position. Now at some point I am already playing with an idea to take on e5 or take on c5, and at some point bishop c4 check, bishop e6 might be unpleasant, so black goes king h8. On the other hand, this is also a bad sign that the king is driven further from the center in the endgame, and I still take my time, play rook e1. You see, I am bringing my rooks to the central files, which might sound strange because in fact these files are not open yet, but because black's pawns are on c5, on e5, because there is such pressure, such tension in the center, it is clear that these files are likely to be open, and then my rooks will be ready to join the battle immediately. So in fact I brought my rooks there anticipating the developments before they actually happened. So black still finds it difficult to find a reasonable plan, goes a6, probably taking control of the square b5 in case of knight b5, knight d6. But you see he is in fact playing too loosely. He played too many pawn moves, and in fact all the pawn moves, they are creating some sort of weaknesses, and it will be instructive for you to see how these weaknesses are used. So I play bishop c2. You see another quiet move. The bishop retreats in order to open the d file. Now the central files are opened. The bishops, they are waiting for the chance to show their strengths, and here apparently tired from passive waiting, my opponent made another active move, played g5, and this is a typical endgame desperation, because certainly this is no way an endgame should be played. It is really not serious to go g4 and so on, because after all we do not have queens, and such an attack on the white's king is not really supported by black's pieces, and also this g5 created many weaknesses also around the black's king. So at this moment I decided that it's time to bring my bishops around. You will be surprised to see with what ease and with what decisive force these seemingly passive bishops come to play. So I start by d takes c5, knight c5, b4. And now black will be struggling for lack of squares. Knight goes to e6. I go bishop b3. Now you see after knight g7, for instance, and this knight is already running out of decent squares, so knight c7, e4 will be extremely strong. Another bishop coming to play, and white's position is suddenly becoming just overwhelming. And my opponent tried to stop e4 by playing bishop c8. In fact, now against e4 he has something like knight d4 at his disposal, and still trying to hold this position together. But on the other hand, here white has two bishops and black has many weaknesses, and it is often so that in order to proceed with your play, with your advantage, with your plan, it is very often necessary to exchange that piece of your opponent which is not looking very active but defending some squares. Now we see that the knight on e6 is hanging, and on the other hand it is making e4 more difficult. And I thought that if I would be able to drive it back, to force it back, then in fact the game would be decided. That's why I came to an idea to play knight a4, b5 and knight b6. You see I am attacking c8, attacking e6, and knight is driven back. He goes to g7. Now black gets an idea of playing bishop e6, easing the pressure. Now one of my most favorite themes in the endgame, exchanging the passive bishop of your opponent. knight c8 very often makes sense, because this passive bishop was defending many squares where your pieces could penetrate. So after knight c8, now I play e4, and now you see that what looked like a slow setup, slow building up of the position some moves ago, now obtains decisive strength. White has fantastic bishops. The another one is coming to c5, and Black has nothing whatsoever to oppose this rising force. For instance, some knight d6, bishop c5, or rook f6, e takes f5. You see the Black's position is completely pinned and basically collapsing under the attack of superior forces, although the material balance, theoretically speaking, is still undisturbed. So after e4, Black cannot do anything. The attempt to close the position with f4 also loses material to bishop c5, rook e8, bishop f7, and it seems that Black is collapsing. So not much he can do. He plays f takes e4, bishop c5, e takes f3. This is of course desperation. I am taking the rook, g takes f3, and now you see White is exchange up and still has very active pieces against the unorganized army of Black's pieces. So he still tries knight e7, rook e5, knight g6, hoping to create some sort of counterplay with knight f4 or knight h4, but in fact the awkward placement of his pieces around his king allows me to deliver a very strong blow, rook d6, after which Black can just resign, because for his to his great unhappiness, after knight takes e5, I just have rook h6 mate. So I was very happy to be able to finish this game in such a beautiful way. In my opinion, the game is a nice display of this slow building up of the position and then rapidly opening it up in order to use the strengths of the bishops. I hope you also found it instructive, and we will move on with some other examples from my practice.